Hello, my name is Tim Riker, and I'm the chair of the Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Welcome this year. We're very excited about this event. It is our remote virtual speaker series. This is to replace our coffee hour, although we will be having a remote coffee hour as well. Our kickoff begins November 5th and will be concluding November 17th. The Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing typically hosts a live coffee hour, and we invite the community to the Rhode Island State House for this event. Unfortunately, this year, because of the COVID virus, we aren't able to do that. Instead, we're hosting a remote speaker series that should go on for about 2 weeks. Every year we tend to have a theme, and this year's theme is a very important one. We're going to address racial equity and justice. This is so important, not only in Rhode Island, but for the entire country, and in fact, for the entire world. In Rhode Island, there are government services. Theoretically, they're available to everyone, but in fact, that's not the case. There's a lot of disparity in the services that go out to people. So deaf people, deaf-blind people, hard-of-hearing people, and late-deafened people need to learn to recognize these disparities and confront them. It takes a lot of work to create social equity. So our speaker series this year will be addressing that. And you'll have an opportunity to learn how to address racial and social equity issues. There are a number of people that comprise the Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and I'll talk about 3 groups in particular. One is our Board of Commissioners, all of whom volunteer their time, and they are governor appointed. We have 13 commissioners, and those commissioners are comprised of deaf people who use American Sign Language, deaf people who do not use sign language, hard of hearing people, and others. We also have hearing people, and we have 2 government representatives, one Rhode Island State Senator and one member of the House of Representatives. What we do as a commission is look at the big picture and think about the needs of the community. We're very interested in legislation as well. The Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing also has a paid working staff. These are permanent employment jobs, permanent jobs, and they take care of the everyday management of the commission. If the commissioners require an action or a workshop, for example, the staff will organize that. They also have grants, and those take care of temporary assignments and contracts. We have one right now called the Healthcare Systems Transformation Project. So the Board of Commissioners include myself, Tim Riker, and what I do is chair the board. We also have a vice chair, and that's Caroline Obrecht. So she serves as my vice chair, and here's a picture of Caroline. Next, we have Betsy Beach. Betsy is our secretary. We also have Brett Hayes, and Brett is our treasurer. We have Kimberly Marthers. Kim is one of our commissioners. We have Christina Nelson, also a commissioner. We have Bunmi Osho, another commissioner. We do have some vacancies as well. We've submitted a couple of recommendations to the governor, and we're waiting for her to appoint those people. We're looking for someone who is deaf and uses American Sign Language. We encourage anyone to apply for that vacancy. Now I'd like to introduce our staff. Ernest Covington III is the Executive Director. He takes care of the everyday operation of his team, his staff, at the Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. We have Pamela Zellner. Pam is the Program Manager. We have Michael Baer. Michael is the Director of the Emergency Public Communication Access Program. We have Holly St. Pierre. And Holly is the Interpreter and CART Referral Specialist. Next, we have Bethany Lenk. Bethany is a member of our support staff. And now I'd like to talk about one of our special contracts, and that's the Healthcare System Transformation Project. The coordinator of that program is Christine West. She's considered the project manager. We also have Thomas Darden. Thomas is responsible for the budget and operations and coordination. Then we have Alex Lafriere. Alex is responsible for outreach. And we have Lindsay Conway. Lindsay takes care of communication and outreach as well. So I've now introduced you to everyone who works for the Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we have planned for you for the next couple of weeks. Today, November 5th, is our kickoff. And we'll have a speaker named Neil Magdalene Morales. She'll be having a conversation with Ernest Covington III. I also want to mention to you that we are having a drawing for a gift card, and Pam Zellner will be talking about that in just a couple of minutes. On Friday, November 6th, we'll have a film from the Rhode Island Relay Service. Then next Monday, November 9th, We have a couple of different speakers. The first one will be Olivia Williams. She is deaf and oral and a cochlear implant user. And she'll be having a conversation with Bumi Osho, one of our commissioners. After that, Ernest Covington will be having a conversation with Thomas Darden from our HSTP program on Tuesday, November 10th. What we're planning to do is invite all of our normal folks who had a booth or a table to participate by having a slideshow. So we'll be able to introduce a lot of our service providers and sponsors. Then we'll be showing a video from Gallaudet University Regional Center. On Thursday, November 12th, we'll be having an awards presentation. We want to honor commissioners who've served their time, and we want to recognize their service and present them with certificates. And don't forget, the 17th will be coming up. And we want to make sure that everyone participates on the 17th because that is a live event. So I want to encourage you to be sure to hold that date. The 17th event will be happening from 6 to 8 p.m. That night, we'll be having our raffle drawing, and you'll be able to win a gift card. Prior to that, November 16th, there will be a video shown by Bridgemark, one of our sponsors, as well as Perspectives, another sponsor. And then, as I mentioned, Tuesday, November 17th is our final event. We hope all of you will join. This will be our coffee hour from 6 to 8. It'll be an opportunity for you to socialize a bit, and Ernest Covington will help to facilitate that conversation. Bethany Lank will take care of all the Zoom logistics. And this is a chance for you to meet some of the community service providers, our sponsors. You can see who our exhibitors typically would be. Had they been able to show up in person, you'll have a chance to meet them that night. You'll also meet our commissioners and our staff. Pam Zellner will be choosing the folks who won gift certificates. We'll also hear from Rhode Island Relay. And then at the very end, I'll be providing some closing remarks. So that's our plan for the next 2 weeks. I'm going to turn it over to Pam Zellner now. She'll tell you a little bit more about the raffle and what you can win, how you can join that raffle, and what the prizes look like. Hi, good to see you all. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the gift cards that we have for you this year. Anyone can enter the raffle, and you'll have the possibility of winning one of our gift cards. Each of those cards is worth $100. And we have 3 of them all together from 3 different sponsors. I want to recognize those sponsors. We have Perspectives Corporation, Partners Interpreting, and Bridgemark Addiction Recovery Services. We're so appreciative of their generous donation by sponsoring these gift cards and giving you the opportunity to win $100. I hope you do win. You might want to know when this raffle starts. Well, actually, you can enter today. It's a little bit different. All you have to do is email me at RICDHH, and you can see the address below. Make sure in your email to include your name, your home address, your email. And we'll collect everyone's entry. We'll get all of those names, put them in a bag, and you'll have to wait until November 17th to find out who the winners are, because we'll have that coffee hour, and that's when we'll be drawing the names and announcing the winners. And as I said earlier, there are 3 winners, so you might be one of them. The raffle starts now, and it continues right up to November 17th, right up to the day of the coffee hour. After November 17th, it'll be too late to enter. So I am really looking forward to getting your name and address. I hope a lot of you join the raffle. I wish you the best of luck, and I hope to see you on November 17th. Thank you. Oh, by the way, before I forget, I just wanted to add one more thing. The raffle begins today, as I said. It will end on the 17th at 12 noon. So you do need to get me your email by noontime on the 17th. Thanks, everybody. Remember, we have 3 different speakers during our series. I'd like to introduce our first set of speakers. Ernest Covington III will be interviewing our first speaker. And that's Mil Magnan Morales. She's the director of the Early Childhood Center. And that's at the Marie Philipps School. That's located in Framingham, Massachusetts. She is also the National Association of the Deaf Region 1 representative. So I'm happy to present Mil Magnan and Ernest. Hello, my name is Ernest Covington III. I'm the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. For this interview, I'd like you to introduce yourself, tell me a little bit about what you do currently, and what you've done in the past. Hi there, my name is Mil Magnan Morales. What I'm doing right now is working as the director of the ECC, the Early Childhood Center, and that's at the Learning Center for the Deaf, now called the Marie Philipps School, and that's located in Framingham, Massachusetts. Prior to that, I've taught for more than 16 years, from infant programs to elementary to high school and beyond. I've also done a lot of trainings, consulting. I'm also a deaf interpreter, and I've interpreted in a number of settings: medical, mental health, and educational. I've also done some theater work. I enjoy consulting, mentoring, and I can translate from text into ASL. I've done so many things and had so many roles in my life, many of which I still conduct and many of which I've put to the side. But all of these experiences make me who I am. After teaching, I became a school administrator, and that's been a brand new experience for me and gives me a whole different perspective. So you are a BIPOC person. I know that you were born in Puerto Rico, and you're also a deaf person. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your journey, some of your experiences. That's a great question. I'd like to tell you about what my experiences have been like. As you mentioned, I was born in Puerto Rico. My family is hearing. I'm the only deaf person in my family. And when they discovered I was deaf, they wanted to find the best possible education for me. So they decided to move to Connecticut. And that's where I went to school, at the American School for the Deaf in Connecticut. I identified at that time as a deaf person. And the reason is, at the School for the Deaf, we all spoke the same language. We shared a culture, and I felt a real sense of belonging. And although my family is hearing and Spanish speaking, and very much Puerto Rican in terms of culture and values, we are a very close family. And yet, I always felt lonely. When I'd get back to school, I felt like I belonged there. And that went on for many years, my entire childhood. When I got to college, I had experienced already a number of frustrations and barriers. I had experienced depression. For example, I wanted to get into a radiology program in college. You had to take certain required courses before you got in, which I did. And finally, it was time for my interview. And the interview was conducted, and I was asked a number of questions, like about how I would hear things. And I said, well, I'd have an interpreter. If I were on a team of people, I would use an interpreter. They said, well, how are you going to hear if there's an emergency or an alarm? And I tried to explain that I would use reasonable accommodations. They still seemed hesitant. They said, the policy says you really have to be able to hear. And regardless of my explaining how I would manage, they wouldn't accept me. Afterward, the interpreter said to me, you really have a valid reason to file a complaint. But at the time, I didn't want to do that. I was very interested in getting a job. I wanted to be a radiologist, but I wanted to get a job. And a lot of my friends have said I'd probably be a great teacher. I love being with children. And I thought, no, I really want to do something in the medical field because I had always loved science. But because of that frustrating interview, the radiology program, I did go ahead and study at an education program, and I loved it. In fact, I got a bachelor's degree in early childhood education, and I earned a master's degree in special education. And I ended up teaching. But I'll always look back on that one unpleasant memory. I decided to start getting involved in some nonprofit organizations at that time. One of them in particular, Council Los Manos, is an organization for deaf Hispanics, and I decided to get involved. What a journey. I was actually one of the board members, and I learned so much. I listened to the stories of the other members about their pride, their frustration, the oppression they lived through, and I thought, I've been through that myself. I remember back in middle school, I had all of my teachers were deaf, and my English teacher was a white deaf woman. And she said to me, when I write your name, it's so darn long. Milla Maglin, do you mind if we just call you Millie for short? At the time, what did I know? I was naive, and so I said, okay. And so I was Millie for years. But when I got involved with Council Los Manos and I shared that story, I realized how wrong that was. And at the very same time, I was teaching kids, and I saw myself in those kids. And that's when my worldview just shifted completely. I had to grieve that for a while. I had to experience a lot of sadness because I had dismissed my family and embraced the deaf community. And I realized that needs to stop. I'm going to re-accept my name, my real name. I'm not Millie anymore. I'm Mill Magnan. And I started researching my own background and culture, especially Puerto Rican culture, traditions, and food. And I just loved it. And I started to really appreciate where I came from. And even though I had, that very close family, now I could share their pride and I could share my story. Because the organization, Council Los Monos, tells us, know your story and share your story. And so that was my rebirth into sharing my story and my culture. And I share it all the time now, especially about being Puerto Rican. And I see in the children that I work with now, they have such limited communications with their Spanish-speaking families. And I want to make sure that they understand their culture, their traditions, who they are in the world. So I try to expose them to the pride that I feel so that they'll feel pride. I had always been a little bit ashamed of my family, and now I realized there's no need to be ashamed of them. And so I teach my children, my students, the same thing. So my identity has completely shifted now. I identify first as a Latina woman, Puerto Rican, and my second identity is as a deaf person. What were some of your biggest challenges? And what do you notice in the BIPOC, deaf, and hard of hearing community as being challenges? Do you have some examples? I was thinking of, identity, but what other examples might there be? Well, I mentioned before about the program in college, the radiology program, rejecting me and how frustrating that was. Another experience I've had was applying for jobs in general. They were always very limited, and I thought, is this because I'm deaf? And is it because I'm Latina? I would see jobs and I could see that they needed more diversity in the workplace. And a lot of times I would apply, but I wouldn't get the job. I never knew if it was because of my deafness or because of my Puerto Rican background. So being BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color is what BIPOC stands for. I'm thinking of one position in particular that they seem to really embrace diversity and multiculturalism, but I didn't get the job. And I accepted that. But the more I thought about it, the more I wondered if it was because I was deaf or was I not qualified. Later, I found out that they did hire someone else to fill the position. It was not a BIPOC person, but it was a deaf person. And that bothered me. I decided I'm seeing too much of this. It really does happen. It's real. It's oppressive. And as a deaf person who is also BIPOC, it happens even more. A lot of deaf people apply for jobs and they get those jobs. But I'm noticing more and more these are non-BIPOC deaf people. That's really sad. And it needs to stop. I'm wondering what you think about COVID-19 and this virus that we're all living through. How has that impacted BIPOC people who are deaf and hard of hearing? Well, it definitely had. It's really impacted us, especially BIPOC deaf children. And the reason I emphasize that is because they're from hearing families for the most part, and those families don't know sign language. And there they are stuck at home. The BIPOC hearing parents are struggling themselves. They may have struggles on the job. They may have lost their jobs because of the virus. They may be a scarcity of food and they can't communicate with their children. Many Spanish-speaking families don't know how to help their children with the academics, with homework, with using Zoom. And that's been a real struggle for families. It's having a huge impact on the kids. Communication, getting information to the BIPOC deaf community is a very big deal. You know, the governor was making announcements on a regular basis about COVID, but there were no interpreters. And we missed all that information. Finally, an interpreter was added, and now it's helping out so much. But these are big, big issues. Families are struggling. They're having difficulty with employment. They're having difficulty helping their kids focus on their schoolwork. As a teacher, and now as a school administrator, I see this every day, and it is a huge problem. We do the best we can to support these families through Zoom, to guide them and help them. But it's really a challenge. Being deaf is hard enough when communication is so important, but being a deaf person of color adds to that difficulty. It's a double challenge. So you've had a number of experiences with organizations. Do you feel that a local organization for BIPOC, deaf, and hard of hearing individuals would be beneficial to a community like Rhode Island? For example, where I came from in Michigan, and I also did work in West Virginia, both of them had several local organizations for deaf people who were also BIPOC. West Virginia had more than 10. And these were all local deaf organizations, and so you could pick the organization that best reflected your community. Michigan had more than 5 local organizations for deaf people and hard of hearing people as well. I know that here in Rhode Island, we don't have any organizations for deaf and hard of hearing BIPOC individuals. Well, I noticed that after I was in Council Los Monos, I got involved in Connecticut, various organizations. And there used to be the Miss Deaf America pageant, and I was involved in that. That changed to an ambassadorship program. And now I'm the chair of the law division. And I do remember back in the day, there just weren't enough deaf interpreters who were certified, and we really needed them. So we decided, because the laws were very limiting and fairly weak, we formed a legislative group, and we filed a legislative bill that really helped to expand the number of deaf interpreters as well as new hearing interpreters. And we did this because, fortunately, our neighbor, Massachusetts, had a state screening. And we were able to get that state screening recognized by Connecticut. And by doing that, people could interpret in Connecticut with a screening. So that legislation passed, and we're very proud of it. And now we have deaf interpreters in Massachusetts, in Connecticut, who are screened in Massachusetts. Now, the National Association for the Deaf, I want to talk about that a little bit. Someone actually gave them my name, and they contacted me and asked me if I'd be interested in becoming the next Region 1 representative. I just started that job 6 months ago, and I've learned so much. We just finished a core training. This is where all the representatives got together. In fact, we just finished yesterday. And we prioritized 5 issues. All of them were excellent issues. But one, I have to say, is the most significant, and that is the notion of dismantling systemic racism. I am so in support of that because we really need to work to develop a toolkit for organizations, for nonprofits or for-profit organizations, especially those that are serving deaf people. We want to encourage organizations, especially board members, to diversify. Typically, they are run by white people. And that's a great example of white supremacy. We want to shift that narrative. We want to make sure that people of all races have an opportunity. And so we suggest that white people unpack racism. And we've talked about a number of topics, things that would do well to encourage deaf people. I really look forward to this next conversation because this is going to help everyone. And I'm hoping to see more diversity in the nonprofit world. With Council Los Manos, I was involved for 7 years or so. Now I'm no longer a board member, but my heart belongs to them. And I'm seeing more and more Hispanic nonprofit organizations. Not so many in New England, except for one in Massachusetts called New England Hispanic Association. It would be really nice if Rhode Island had their own organization for Hispanic deaf people. I know that Rhode Island has a large number of Hispanic citizens. I think it's important that you find people who have potential to become good leaders. Find those people and start from there. Also, I really encourage you to look for grassroots people, as well as people with college degrees, and they can be partnered and have a mentoring relationship. That's so important. And that's what will help organizations thrive, and the numbers will grow. To be honest with you, you can't expect BIPOC individuals to do the work. They want to do the work, they are enthusiastic about the work, but they need some guidance. And that's really, really important. I strongly recommend that you start with the young people in school. When I was in school, I belonged to the Pee-wee organization, and it was just for elementary school kids. And then it led to junior NAD. So start there with the little ones in elementary school. That'll help a lot. I'd like to hear your perspective and your observations about NAD Region 1, and particularly what you might recommend to us here in Rhode Island at the Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. How can we strengthen our relationship with BIPOC deaf community members? For example, is it a communication access issue, one of advocacy, or resources? Well, as NAD Region 1 rep, as I mentioned before, we have these 5 priorities, and one of them being to dismantle systemic racism. It's just so important to start with people who are already biased. Start with them first. Help them unpack their racism, their biases. And this isn't something that happens overnight. It's a long process, but it needs to start. It's important to have an open mind and an open heart, and be willing to partner with BIPOC community members. At the same time, we need to fix the system. Be sure that it's welcoming. Be sure that there's partnering. Be sure that we're working together. That's so important. One other thing I wanted to add is not only for BIPOC people, but for deaf, blind people and others, make sure that you have the resources necessary. Make sure that there are interpreters. Make sure there are navigators, SSPs for deaf-blind people. Make sure that there are interpreters for deaf-blind people. Make sure that you provide Spanish-speaking interpreters for the children who have hearing people in their families. Make sure that you have the resources available and ready for those marginalized people. Do you have any advice or any suggestions that you want to share with people? Not even necessarily BIPOC. Well, my advice for non-BIPOC people in the deaf community, it's like I said earlier, it's so important to have an open mind and an open heart. Be willing to engage and partner. Be willing to unpack your own biases. Be an ally. And I mean a real ally. Do the work, because some people will say, oh, I'm an ally, I support you, but do they do anything? Typically not. We see that so often. So please be a true ally. That would be my advice for non-BIPOC deaf community members. Before we close, I'm wondering if there's anything that you, as a role model, would like to recommend to our youth, to the next generation of BIPOC, deaf or hard of hearing people. Well, my advice for you, if you're a young BIPOC person, is don't let them stop you. Speak up. And at the same time, embrace your own culture. Embrace your traditions, your language, your family's language, and your heritage, because that's where you come from, and you should cherish that. Never let anyone stop you, and never give up. There will be times when you're frustrated, when you're heartbroken, when you just feel lost and you have no hope, but don't let that stop you. Just keep going and find people who can support you. Find people who can guide you. Don't try to do this alone. Be sure you have someone to support you. That is really crucial. Thank you so much. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me, and I enjoyed this. Now, we do have more speakers, so stay tuned. We also have some films and other events. Friday, November 6th, we're really looking forward to a film sponsored by the Rhode Island Relay Service. And Monday, November 9th, we'll have 2 more interviews with special guests. And we really look forward to having that. Thank you very much.